Shall we talk about it? Should we talk about the thing that we're all talking about? At least half the internet seems to be talking about. Let's talk about Threads, baby. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist. So let's talk a little bit about the new product from Meta that launched today, hotly anticipated in recent days, the new Instagram Threads app, which has just dropped. And according to Zuck's own thread earlier today, hit over 2 million users in the first 4 hours, which actually has just recently unseated ChatGPT as the fastest growing piece of software on the internet for many years. It took them 5 days. It took Instagram's Threads just a couple of hours to achieve 1 million users. 100 million users, how far away is that? You only need about 1% of the billion users that are already on Instagram to convert over to signing up for a Threads account, and you are going to have a whole bunch of people using it. So let's take a look and talk a little bit about why is an app that's all about text and conversation these days hitting resonance in an age where aren't we already completely oversaturated with the world of social media in all of its different forms. Of course, I've jumped on the bandwagon. This is my own Threads profile. You can find me in the same way you can on most social networks, in the same way that it says above here, at James Poulter. And you can find me on Threads there as well. Now, a bunch of things that probably are worth just noting. It's still very much a work in progress, it feels like, this application. Rolling out in a number of markets around the world, but it's not entirely available everywhere. There are EU legislations that are preventing it rolling out in certain markets. It's also only available on the web or on iOS at the moment, and you can't really operate it fully from the web in the same way as you can on the desktop. They've done a few interesting things in the mobile app, in particular allowing you to instantly port over your original Instagram username. You could also go follow all of the people you already follow on Instagram and have them follow you back. And you can post content from Instagram into Threads really easy. The integration, particularly of sharing reels, of videos, thumbnail images, and other things like that, is super simple. Now, there's a few things that are missing from here, as I pointed out on my own thread earlier on today, from the types of interactions that we have seen historically on Meta's other platforms, most notably Facebook, Instagram, obviously, and also Elon's Twitter. And there are some things that really carry over from the Twitter experience into Threads, and then there's a bunch of stuff that is missing. The two big features that are probably most notable are hashtags. Yep, there's no hashtags currently running on Threads. You can't just click into something. You also can't actually, just as Neiman posted in here, just jump straight into searching for actual posts. So that navigation experience is a little bit lightweight right now. The things that are present are names, as I mentioned, bios really easily. You've also got the stuff that carries over from Instagram, like Linktree or whatever links you've been able to put in your profile. And obviously your follower graph is going to follow you across as well, including things like profile photos and other stuff. We can post photos and images and all of the usual bits. A couple of things that are missing actually in that functionality is the lack of being able to post any GIFs. There's no kind of native Giphy integration that you find over on Instagram and even on WhatsApp and other places. I'm sure that's in the works, but maybe they are thinking about keeping this a more streamlined experience than other places. I think the bigger question for me, and I was writing a thread about this exact topic earlier on today, is why is an app like Threads even something that people are blowing up about right now? Now, you could think that the main reason really for people to jump into something like Threads at this time is very reactionary. It's reactionary to essentially all the stuff that's going on over on Twitter. We've also seen the protests that are happening on Reddit, fueled by furores around the data scraping that all of the large language models have been doing to fuel the training data that's going into ChatGPT or into Google's Bard engine and all of the other large language models that are scraping data from the internet. But I think there's more to it than that. I don't think it purely comes down to just a bunch of disgruntled journalists, politicians, and crypto bros coming over from a dying platform into something new. I think there's more to it. We'd have to understand, first of all, what's the history of the social web? How have things played out over the years? And generally, what we see is that every new big social platform tends to be a reaction to the one that came before it. As I highlighted in this post earlier, if you've been on the internet long enough to know this, some of you watching will not have been, you go back as far as MySpace, it was a highly customizable, very kind of social experience. You could do HTML backgrounds and you could customize colors and fonts in your top 9, picking the people that you wanted to to feature as people on your profile. And MySpace was hugely dominant until Facebook broke into the scene with a much more streamlined, much more restricted experience, and also the way in which it rolled out through a very specific social graph of the university networks in the US, then lastly the UK and other parts of the world, well documented in The Social Network, the movie, which I'm sure Zuck is still reeling from the portrayal of him in that. So you see a bunch of things that follow through from that transition. Then obviously went into the world of the social web, expanding beyond just text-based images. And that's where you begin to see platforms like Twitter beginning to enable imagery content. But Twitter felt very much like a response to Facebook in a way, because it was much more open. It wasn't just about the friends that you had. There was a meme going around for a long time in the kind of early 2000s when these platforms were beginning to get really prominent in the, well, late noughties anyway, around that Facebook was the people that you went to university with. Twitter was the people that you wish you went to university with. And I think that still plays out today. Now, Twitter, though, was very text heavy, of course, and Instagram then felt like a real reaction to that, Instagram being highly visual. But as Instagram has matured, and certainly after Meta acquired it, not only became visual, but it became slightly artificial, very highly crafted. This is where we obviously got the big boom in things like filters and people adapting their photos using third-party apps to customize things. And Instagram tried to jump on those things as well with releasing of things like Layout as an app to be able to do tiled images, for example, and then gradually copying over features from the likes of Snapchat and TikTok as those began to emerge. And of course, TikTok is really the social network of the moment, at least as of the past few weeks, and past couple of years, certainly during the pandemic. And the TikTok has a much more kind of raw feeling to it, the video content. Now, that was at least in the early days. It is, again, began to become more hyper-stylized and people building real formats over there on TikTok. But it felt like it was a reaction to Instagram's very curated way of doing visual content into something that was much more raw. Come full circle, and here we end up with something like Threads, a text-based, non-searchable, no hashtag platform from who than you would expect, from Meta. And I think that's why it's a really interesting place and time for something like this to launch. Not just because it's a reaction to every social platform that's come before it. As I've said, that seems to be the way that these things play out. But for a couple of really crucial reasons. I think one of the big things that in the age of AI, and certainly in the last few months as we've seen the explosion of ChatGPT and other AI-driven text-based conversational tools, one of the big questions is how are we going to know what content really is on the internet? When, you know, the Fediverse, which this is going to play into, the open social web where you can port over different bits of content from platform to platform using the same username, more on that in future videos to come. When that becomes a real reality and all of these different platforms like Blue Sky and Mastodon and obviously things like Threads all begin to work together, one of the big worries is that the AI bots are going to just start feeding massive amounts of AI generated content into these spaces. And I think what's really smart with what Threads are doing here is attaching it to your existing social graph of Instagram, which typically hasn't been as bot heavy as things like Twitter in the past. And that has a real potential to allow people to start reacting to this AI content movement, that you're having a new platform mostly for a predominantly Gen Z and earlier millennial audience where the majority base of Instagram users has been historically, now first engaging with a text-based social networking platform again. Not one that's peer-to-peer, not one that's closed, WhatsApp or other social messaging apps, but one that's out in the open in the same way that Twitter was in the early days. And I think that is the real appeal. That's why people seem to be jumping on it, is that we're looking for something that's genuine, that's got human content, that seems to be verified of real people, and it's something that we can engage with out in public discourse, which is obviously the early appeal of Twitter. And the big thing here is that for Gen Z in particular, they would have never had the opportunity to have experienced the likes of Facebook in the early days when it was very text heavy and it was very much about what you were doing and thinking in the moment. Equally, even platforms like LinkedIn itself, where you're watching this, had similar kind of vibes. So this, I think, is a really interesting opportunity for Threads and for Meta in general. Could they crack the code of what we're all looking for, which is the reaction to the latest social trend? Now, of course, all things that are old are new again. There are a bunch of things in here that obviously feel very similar to social platforms that have gone before. But sometimes just the appeal of starting a fresh slate can be enough. So what about you? Are you going to be playing around with Threads? Are you going to go and dive in and try this out? I'd love to see what your thoughts are. If you're interested, I'm going to keep posting stuff about Threads and my thoughts on it over here on @JamesPoulter on Threads or on Instagram, anywhere else where you want to find me. But I'd love your comments in the section below, and I hope that you will give me your time of day. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again on another little one of these videos sometime soon. See you over on Threads. Bye.